WHGE 95.3. Coming up, the Open Eye. Oh, mercy.
Those of us that indulge in or commit intellectual violence don't do so for the pleasure of mental masturbation or ego diddling. We do so because the chains of oppression on our people's minds are deep and difficult to remove.
I love you, Sherry. I sure do. WHGE 95.3 FM. Good morning, my children of the sun. Look, forgot where I was at with that. All right, welcome to the Open Eye on WHGE 95.3. I'm Patrice Gibbs, your host, Third Eye Optometrist. Yes, D here to get the show started. I know I'm a little late, y'all, but I had a little difficulty here. It's all good because I'm here now. All right. Every generation has its purpose. Ours is to reveal the truth and reverse the brainwashing. And we do that right here. You know, hey, Vaughn, I see you there, brother. The greatest battle being fought today is not on the battlefield, actually. It is not in Congress. It's not even in the streets. It's being fought inside your mind. Because before anyone can control your labor, they must control your thinking. Before they can rewrite your history, they must convince you that history doesn't matter. Before they can exploit your economy, they must convince you that exploitation is opportunity. Before they can silence your voice, they must persuade you to silence yourself and those around you. That's why the Open Eye exists. This program is not about telling you what to think. It's about encouraging you to ask better questions. Who benefits? Who profits? Who writes the history? Who owns the media? Who finances the politicians? Who decides what is taught in schools and what is deliberately omitted? And people that stop asking questions become easy to manipulate. And people that forget their history become easy to deceive. And people who surrender their ability to think critically eventually surrender everything else. Here on the Open Eye, we continue examining history, politics, economics, culture, and power. Not because controversy is our goal, but because truth requires examination. Whether you agree with every conclusion is less important than whether you are willing to investigate the evidence for yourself. Knowledge without courage changes nothing. Courage without knowledge is easily manipulated. But when knowledge and courage come together, people become impossible to control. So open your ears, open your minds, and most importantly, keep your eyes open. This is the Open Eye. I'm Patrice Gibbs. All right, let me get my disclaimer out the way.
Views and opinions expressed on Open Eye are those of the hosts, guests, and contributors and do not reflect the policy or position of WHGE 95.3 FM nor our sponsor, the Delaware Center for Homeless Vets. Any content provided by Open Eye's hosts, guests, or contributors are theirs and are not intended to malign any religion, ethnic group, company, or individual. All right.
WHGE 95.3 FM. Here we go, some FAFO. It's this hussy, she went after the wrong person, and she showed why she is not qualified for her job. A rube named Caroline Levitt, who holds the title of White House Press Secretary, recently said that Cher's activism is irrelevant, outdated, and rooted in a world that doesn't exist anymore. Yeah, she said that about Cher. Cher's a legend. I watched Cher. Let me see, when it was the Sonny and Cher show. And that was back in the 60s. I was 6, 7 years old. And she had her own show. I was 13, 14, 15, whatever. You know, the 60s, the 70s. Then in the 80s, she won an Oscar. Look, Cher response. This is Cher's response. You're gonna love this. Let's get real for a second, honey. Caroline Levitt, born 1997, former White House assistant, tenure 8 months. I had wigs that lasted longer than that. She lost 2 congressional races, both by double digits. Host a podcast with fewer listeners than my cat's Twitter account. Damn! You talk about putting a black eye in the game. What was I? Okay. She advocates free speech, yet blocks anyone who challenges her. And her latest accomplishment, calling a woman who has topped the charts in 6 different decades irrelevant. Like I said, 6 different decades, with and without something. That's word. And she trended for all the wrong reasons. Baby girl, I've been fighting for rights, touring the world, and reinventing myself since before your parents went to prom. Yeah, because she's about 80 years old. I face critics louder, harsher, and far more meaningful than anything you can type. And yet, here I am, still here, still singing. So if you want to talk about relevance, sweetheart, take a seat. Yeah, see, you don't go messing with some peoples, you know, and you know, you got a white chick that been around 80 years, hanging out with all kind of different people and this, that. You don't want to mess with her. That's word. And I'm going to keep it moving here. I know by now you all saw the young lady on the train surrounded by the Patriot Front. Yeah, on July 4th. An image was captured by Reuters photographer Cheney Orr, and it went viral globally. It's now iconic, really. And it's serving as a stark visual text of modern American tension. And that's putting it lightly. The photograph shows Bernita Baldwin. No, how you say her name? Bolding, okay. 33-year-old black mother of 2, sitting completely alone in a crowded Washington, D.C. metro train. Surrounding her are dozens of masked members of the Patriot Front, a white supremacist group that marched through the nation's capital earlier that morning. A bunch of cowards. While Bolding sat quietly, staring directly ahead, the image quickly became a symbol of resilience, drawing comparisons to iconic photography from the Civil Rights era. And then came the smear campaign. After the photo amassed millions of views, right-wing social media accounts attempted to shift the narrative by digging into Bolden's past, publicizing a prior arrest record in an attempt to smear her character. Wait a minute. I think that was proven to be fake. She had never arrested and she didn't have no mug shot. That crap was AI. Her family, led by her brother Paul, refused to let her be dehumanized or turned into a weaponized political symbol. Speaking to the Washington Post, Paul clarified that the prior charge had been fully dismissed and stemmed from a period when his sister was experiencing a severe mental health crisis. So there was no criminality. Paul described his sister as quiet, tough, and fundamentally kind-hearted. One of the amazing ones. I do see her as a role model of letting people know it's going to be okay because God got us. Let me tell you something, the core of dignity over digital cruelty. Benita Bolding's family refused to stay quiet after masked white nationalist cowards surrounded her on the DC train, and right-wing accounts tried to smear her. Her brother stood up and told the world who she really is. One of the amazing ones. A mother or two who deserves dignity, not attacks. Thanks, Paul, for defending your sister when she needed it most. See, this moment underscores a recurrent ugly reality in the digital age. The immediate attempt to weaponize a person's vulnerability rather than confront the extremism staring us in the face. You're talking about those proud nation punks. Benita Bolding did not ask to become a viral symbol on her train ride to Silver Spring. Yet faced with a literal wall of mass intimidation, her quiet composure spoke volumes. When online factions tried to strip away her humanity by dragging up a dismissed past crisis, it was the fierce protected love of black family structure that drew the line. That's word. Big ups, Brother Paul. That's how you do it. Look after your sister, bro. WHGE 95.3 FM. Open eye. All right. This is Patrice Gibbs. This is Open Eye. All over it's happening here in New York. Okay, New York got Mandani. We got Carney. Bam. But China got China, baby. All right. Let me tell you about the reality behind the concrete. Why China's so-called housing crash isn't a Western-style recession. The corporate media is flashing red alerts. China's real estate market has wiped out 2 decades of gains. To a Western financial analyst, this looks like the end of the world. In the West, if housing collapses, the entire economic house of cards falls with it. Because our economies are built on the back of speculative real estate debt. But if you listen to the voices on the ground, the ones pointing out the sheer absurdity of standard Western housing policy, you start to see a very different picture. Houses are for living, not for speculation. For years, the mainstream narrative warned that Beijing's aggressive tightening on property developers would trigger an economic apocalypse. They told us that popping the real estate bubble would plunge the nation into permanent depression. Why? Because the Western economic model relies on housing being an investment vehicle first and a human right second. See, we've been conditioned to believe it's completely normal, even noble, to sacrifice your whole life savings, sign away 30 years of your future labor, and over-leverage yourself just to secure a roof over your head. China's leadership explicitly rejected that premise with a simple directive. Houses are for living, not for speculation. They're diffusing the bubble on purpose. What the financial commentators call a crash was in reality a controlled demolition. The problem, massive predatory developers like Evergrande were treating housing like a casino, driving up prices and pricing out the working class. So I got all this homelessness. The intervention. Beijing instituted the 3 red lines policy, deliberately cutting off easy credit to speculative developers. They chose short-term economic pain to prevent long-term systemic rot. Did it hurt their GDP numbers? Absolutely. Did it wipe out paper wealth? Yeah. But it also forcibly shifted capital away from empty concrete towers and redirected it toward real, tangible production, advanced manufacturing, green energy, and technology. The commentary from regular onlookers hits the nail on the head. We've been lied to by institutions that benefit from artificially high housing costs. Banks, hedge funds, and mega landlords want working people to believe that hyperinflation in the housing market is a sign of a healthy economy. It's not healthy to spend your entire working life paying off a single asset just to survive. When housing prices fall to match actual utility rather than speculative greed, the investor class loses. But the people ultimately win. China's real estate correction isn't a sign of failure. It's a stark reminder that an economy should serve the people who live in it, not the speculators trading it. See, China got damn good sense. WHGE 95.3 FM. Open eye. All right. Patrice Gibbs on the Open Eye. You know, it's something, I've seen this online and I had to agree with it. You got to talk about this. I have seen police beating women. I seen them snatch a black woman out the car and pound her in the face. Of course, I've seen police beating black men, even beating some of them to death. Seen police beating students. How dare you speak up about the injustices surrounding you right in your school? I seen police beat the elderly. I seen police push an old man down the steps and make him crack his head, and they didn't give a damn. Body slam people and all cuffed up. I seen peaceful protesters tear gas, slammed to the pavement, like I said, shot with rubber bullets in the face, dragged through the streets and arrested by the hundreds. But I ain't never seen the police beating white supremacists with the same enthusiasm. Why is that? That question should make America uncomfortable, but it don't. Because throughout American history, policing has too often treated movements demanding racial justice as a threat to order, while treating organized white supremacy as something to be managed, tolerated, protected, or at times infiltrating the very institutions responsible for enforcing the law. Excuse me. Black people marching for civil rights were beaten on the Edmund Pettus Bridge. Workers organizing for dignity were beaten and killed. Students protesting war were beaten and killed. People protesting police brutality have been met with police brutality. But let some white supremacists march through a city carrying symbols of racial terror, and suddenly we hear lectures about restraint and de-escalation and constitutional rights and the importance of keeping the peace. Where was all that restraint when black children were being blasted with fire hoses? Where was all that de-escalation when civil rights workers were being beaten? Where was all that constitutional concern when black people were attacked for demanding the right to vote? It's not about claiming that no white supremacist has ever been arrested. Yeah, they might have been arrested. The orange disaster's father was arrested, but he had to do some extreme racist shit. Damn, I said that on the radio, didn't I? So the question is really about the pattern. Who is automatically perceived as dangerous? Who's given the benefit of the doubt? Whose anger is considered political speech and whose anger is considered a riot? Whose weapons are treated as an expression of constitutional liberty and whose very presence is treated as a probable cause? America, you keep asking why black communities distrust the police. Are you kidding me? Perhaps maybe America need to ask a different question. What has law enforcement ever done throughout history to earn the trust of black people? Because your badge does not erase your history by a long shot. A uniform does not erase institutional culture. And a slogan painted on the side of a patrol car does not erase what people have witnessed with their own eyes. I've seen police beat people demanding justice. I've seen police beat people demanding peace. I've seen police beat people demanding to be treated like human beings. And far too often, when white supremacy announces itself openly and proudly, the whole posture changes. Oh, the voices get softer. The tactics become restrained. The explanation becomes complicated. And suddenly everybody want to remember the Constitution. Why is that? What's up with that? I'm going to tell you what's up with that. Because the police are the enforcement arm of white supremacy. America has spent far more time policing the victims of white supremacy than confronting white supremacy itself. We talk about how these white supremacist groups had infiltrated police forces and FBI reports on it. They didn't have to infiltrate them. They was already there. The slave patrol was just going by a different name. It's still protecting white supremacy. This is Open Eye. WHGE 95.3 FM, the education advocacy station. Yeah, you're going to learn something here. Check this out now. Several armed white men fired at a crowd full of black people, all while children were playing outside. 2 black men from that crowd returned fire. A Florida judge has now denied their stand your ground defense, and they're facing first-degree murder charges. All right, let's get into this. But before we get started, let me paint a picture of where that incident took place. We're in Baker County, Florida. Yeah. And I want to thank Black Belt Daily for this. Sister running and reporting on that. Baker County, Florida. A place where you can walk into the county courthouse and see a mural. This is also the county where the white son of a retired deputy killed DJ Broadnax, an unarmed black man, and successfully used Florida's stand your ground law to avoid prison time. Oh yeah, and that mural is the KKK in the courthouse, making them look like heroes on horseback and stuff. Yeah. Unarmed black man. Baker County, Florida. That's the backdrop of where this incident took place. Back in June of 2025, Jamarian Byrd and Travis Roberts were hanging out with friends in their Baker County neighborhood when a group of white males, one carrying a shotgun, another with a rifle, approached them from a nearby intersection. They just hanging out. According to witnesses, after Devon Powers Jr. opened fire, Jamarian Byrd and Travis Roberts grabbed their own weapons and returned fire. Devon Powers later died. After the incident, Jamarian Byrd and Travis Roberts didn't chase anyone. Police were called, and they cooperated fully, but they didn't receive a self-defense pass. A few months later, a Baker County grand jury indicted them on first-degree premeditated murder. They also face aggravated battery, 3 counts of shooting into an occupied dwelling, and discharging a firearm in public. Jamarian Byrd invoked Florida's Stand Your Ground law seeking immunity from prosecution. Sadly, a judge denied that. Yeah. Her reasoning? She said they had every right to fire back when Powers first shot at them. But once Powers started retreating, that right dissolved. So if you defend yourself, I guess it don't matter that Devon Powers was still holding his shotgun when he was struck. So if you defend yourself, the person shooting at you backs off or backs down, but they still, you don't know what their mindset is. Black Bad Belly said they spoke with Cissy Jones, who is fighting to get justice for Jamarian Byrd and Travis Roberts. The Baker County Sheriff's Office, the State Attorney's Office, and the judge know that these men were ambushed. Those armed men created a well-founded fear in everyone that day, and they responded like they should have, like the heroes that they were. They charged both of them with premeditated murder. How is it premeditated when you were reacting to getting shot at? They charged both of them with premeditated murder when those two men remain armed is purely evil. It sure as hell is. Sissy, like many others, takes issue with what appears to be a two-tier justice. It appears to be? You kidding me? Stand your ground is supposed to be clear. If someone shoots at you, don't you have the right to defend yourself? Now, Jamarian Byrd and Travis Roberts are sitting in jail waiting for trial, all for the alleged crime of protecting themselves. It's from Black Belt Daily. I mean, just imagine standing on a familiar corner in your own neighborhood. The summer air is warm, and behind you, children are laughing and playing. Children out there. Suddenly, the atmosphere shatters. A group of armed white men marches towards the crowd. One positions a shotgun, another raises a rifle. They don't talk. They open fire. And in that split second, you are staring death in the face. What do? Well, if you're Jamarian Byrd and Travis Roberts, you draw your weapons and you fire back. You stand as a human shield between armed attackers and playing children. You do what any human being with an ounce of courage would do. You neutralize the threat. You don't chase them down. When the flashing lights arrive, you don't run. You stand your ground, cooperate with the police, and you tell the goddamn truth. In the same world, these men would be commended for saving lives. And this is Baker County, Florida, where the law doesn't bend for everyone. It fractures. The day Jamarian Byrd and Travis Roberts are locked away in steel cages. They aren't being treated as protectors. They are being prosecuted as cold-blooded killers, indicted by a grand jury on charges of first-degree premeditated murder. So, if someone pull up shooting at me, I gotta go over this again. If someone pull up shooting at me, and I get the ideal to defend myself and pop a cap up in their racist ass, then I thought about it, so it was premeditated. God damn. Think about the sheer audacity of that charge. How do you premeditate your own survival during a surprise attack? Florida's famous stand your ground law is marketed as an ironclad shield for anyone protecting their life unless you black. Because this Florida judge looked at this case and deliberately stripped that shield away. Her legal gymnastics, she claimed that the exact moment the attacker turned to retreat, the right to self-defense evaporated. It apparently means nothing to the court that the aggressor was still actively holding a shotgun when he was struck. The law expects two men under a hail of gunfire to act with clinical precision of a surgeon, assessing the precise millisecond an attacker changes physical direction while bullets are still flying. Jeez Louise. To truly understand this venom, you have to look at the scenery. Walk into the Baker County Courthouse and look at the walls. This is the same exact jurisdiction where the white son of a retired deputy killed a DJ. Jamarian Byrd and Travis Roberts didn't look for a fight. The fight came to their doorstep. They did what the state failed to do. They protected their community. And now the system is punishing them for refusing to stand there and die. And defending your life and the lives of innocent children make you a first-degree murderer in the eyes of the law, then the law isn't just broken, it's a weapon. This is the open eye. Aged. All right. WHGE 95.3 FM. Open eye. Yeah. I want to thank Dr. Payne for sending me the video on this. Right. When Natalie King and her family went paddleboarding in Central Florida. In early June, they were surprised to hear teenagers shouting downstream. As they paddled closer, King realized the seriousness of the situation. A group of white teenagers had left their black friend, Marquise, stranded on the riverbank. He couldn't swim. "Look, I'm going to die," Marquise yelled across the river. "Wait for me." His friends laughed in his face, hurled slurs at him, and told him he'd learned to swim the hard way that day. A video of the incident captured one of the teens making monkey noises in the background. Marquise had on a light jacket, but it was child size, too small for him, and conditions that day made things worse. Yeah. Water is so unforgiving. Yeah. That's what King said in the June 3rd follow-up. It could turn diddly in a split second. There was a current that day. There was wind. And he said he couldn't swim well. That's a recipe for disaster. So I knew right then and there, I wasn't going to leave him to just cross on his own. King reassured the team that he wasn't going to drown. She and her husband, Justin White, had him grab hold of a strap attached to their boards and pulled him to safety on the other side. And when news broke of Nolan Wells' death, many viewers circulated King's video alongside it as a warning about water safety and the company one keeps. Wells had been among a small group of white teenagers at a large 4th of July celebration on Horn Island, located off the Mississippi Gulf Coast. He vanished during the event. After an extensive search, his body was recovered from the water near the island's northwestern tip on July 6, 2 days later. His parents noted he was a good swimmer, and the exact cause of death remains unknown. King says she reposted her video of Marquis on July 8th in light of the Nolan Wells case. She assured viewers that Marquis is safe and doing well. Marquis' mother, Tiffany, posted her own TikTok video saying, "I had met with the parents face to face and discussed my concerns." Viewers flooded the comments with gratitude to King and her family for recognizing the gravity of the situation. One person wrote, "It doesn't matter if he had a life jacket, he felt unsafe, period. Thank you to this family." Many found the situation heartbreaking. Another commentator offered her own read on the teen's behavior. As a black woman, I just honestly want to say thank you from the bottom of my heart. The things they were yelling showed how they really felt about him. This hurts my heart so much. All right. Yeah, the video of Marquis is difficult to watch. A young black teenager is stranded on the bank of a Florida river. He cannot swim. He's crying out in fear, "Look, I'm going to die." Instead of helping him, the white teenagers he was with laughed. They mocked him. They called him racial slurs. One of them even made monkey noises while he begged for help. If Natalie King and her family had not happened to paddle by, this story could have ended very differently. This is exactly why black parents must have uncomfortable conversations with their children. Teach your children that friendship is not determined by who laughs when everything is fine. Friendship is revealed by who protects you when you're vulnerable. Teach them that being the only black person in a majority white group carries risks that cannot be ignored simply because someone calls themselves your friend. That does not mean every white person is dangerous. It does mean that trust should be earned through consistent actions, not assumed because someone is friendly, attends the same school, or invites you to hang out. And when people use racial slurs, laugh at your fear, humiliate you, or abandon you in a life-threatening situation, they are telling you exactly how much they value your life. Believe them. I told you a few weeks ago. Yeah, right? Who was it? Carmelo was, I forget his name, the young man that was convicted of murder behind self-defense. And you find yourself surrounded by white people and you're only black person there, get out of there. Because your life might be in danger. The timing of this story has understandably resonated with many people because it comes days after the tragic death of Nolan Wells. The circumstances surrounding Nolan's death remain under investigation, and many questions have not been answered publicly. Regardless of what investigators ultimately determine in that case, the Marquis video stands on its own as a stark reminder that the people around you during a crisis can determine whether you live or die. Every black parent should teach their children simple truths, simple rules. Never let yourself become isolated with people who have not proven they will protect you. If something feels wrong, leave immediately. Tell your family where you are and who you with. Never allow peer pressure to override your instincts. Understand that your safety is always more important than fitting in. Because you don't need to fit in with them. Natalie King and her family did what human beings should do. They saw a frightened teenager in danger and refused leaving behind. Their compassion saved a life. The tragedy is that people who should have protected Marquis were the very people who placed him in danger. Be careful who you hang out with. Sometimes, the most important survival skill is recognizing that not everyone who calls themselves your friend is your friend. You got, after all this mess, you got many black families telling their children, do not hang out with white people. Especially not by yourself. This is Open Eye. I'm Patrice Gibbs. WHGE 95.3 FM. Imagine this. Just imagine this. 3 black men take a white man on a boating expedition. The white man never comes home. Do you honestly believe this story would disappear from the news cycle after a few days? Hell no. Hell fucking no. The media will run it around the clock. Every detail of those black men's lives will become national news. Every juvenile mistake, every traffic ticket, every arrest, every rumor will be dug up and presented as evidence of who they really are. If one of them sold candy when he was 6 years old, pendants would be on television asking whether it revealed a lifelong pattern of criminal behavior. Cable news panels would spend hours dissecting their motives. Politicians would demand justice before all the facts are even known. Commentators would use the case to pathologize the entire black community. They would ask, what's wrong with black culture, black families, black neighborhoods, and black men? Millions of people will feel comfortable making sweeping judgments about an entire race because of the actions of a few individuals. Social media will explode with demands for the harshest possible punishment. Some will openly call for violence. Others will wrap those demands in the language of law and order. Now ask yourself another question. Why are the standards so different depending on who the people involved are? Justice should never depend on race. Because that's America's tradition. Public concern should never depend on race. Media attention should never depend on race. Human dignity should never depend on race. Every family deserves a thorough investigation. Every victim deserves answers. Every case deserves the same urgency, regardless of who is missing and who was last seen with them. The death of Nolan Wells deserves a complete, transparent, and uncompromising investigation. His family deserves the truth, not selective outrage, not selective attention, and not selective justice. Equal justice cannot exist if equal concern does not. Rest in power, Nolan Wells. Let's look at this. All right? Because the Nolan Wells coverage gives us a lesson, not just about a missing man, but about how narratives are constructed in real time. This is why media literacy matters. Watch how quickly language changes. At first we're told that Nolan Wells is missing. Then we're told authorities say Wells' friends left the island and he stayed behind and was supposed to take a different boat back to the mainland. Listen carefully. Where did that version of events come from? Let me tell you again. Authorities say Wells' friends left the island and he stayed behind and was supposed to take a different boat back to the mainland. Authorities say. Unless investigators have independent evidence confirming it, that timeline originated with his so-called friends. The last known people reported to have seen Nolan Wells. Yet once that account passes through law enforcement, it's repeated by the media as authorities say. Suddenly a witness account begins to sound like an established fact. And that witness, or those witnesses, above all people, should be viewed with big-time suspicion. Because I'm not going to mince words, they did that shit. See, that's one of the oldest framing techniques in journalism. The source hasn't necessarily changed. The perceived credibility has. And then comes another familiar phrase. Investigators say they have no information at this time to indicate a crime was committed. Notice what that statement does psychologically. See, most people don't hear the qualifying words "at this time." What sticks in their mind is no crime was committed. But those are not the same statement. An absence of evidence at an early stage of an investigation is not evidence that no crime occurred. Early investigations often involve uncertainty, and investigators may not yet know what happened. Investigators say they have no information at this time, to indicate a crime was committed. See, the framing encourages the audience to begin mentally ruling out possibilities before an investigation has even reached any conclusion. That's how narratives are built. Not necessarily through outright lies, but through emphasis, through repetition, through the order in which information is presented, and through what questions are asked and which ones are never asked. A healthy press should approach every unexplained disappearance or death with the same level of professional skepticism. That means examining witnesses' accounts, collaborating in timelines, identifying inconsistencies, and clearly distinguishing between verified facts and unverified claims. Media literacy means recognizing the difference between facts, claims, official statements, and verified evidence. And those categories are not interchangeable. When news organizations blur those distinctions intentionally or unintentionally, and I don't believe it's unintentional for a minute, scientists can begin accepting assumptions before the evidence is fully developed. The responsibility of journalism is not to tell us what happened before investigators know what happened. Its responsibility is to tell us what is known, what is alleged, what remains unknown, and what evidence supports each claim. Don't consume the news passively. Listen to the verbs. Notice the sourcing. Ask who benefits from a particular framing. Separate evidence from narrative, because the story you're told is often just as important as the facts that are still being uncovered. And let's look at some of those facts. Because they lied about when Nolan Wells left the island. They lied about where he was when they gave his mother his phone and what time they left him. The last people that saw him. Okay? And they scrubbed all their social media. All their social media is gone. And they didn't all lawyered up. And one of them, their mother, is a judge. Y'all killed that boy. Look, clear up your social media and y'all stick together and don't say nothing to the press. That's how that works. And get your story together. You got a group of rich white boys with one black kid. Goddamn, Mississippi, goddamn. This is a lynching. And the ritual is in place. Just an open eye. WHGE 95.3 FM. Right. History doesn't repeat itself. It repeats unanswered questions. Every time a high-profile case involving a black victim under suspicious circumstances captures national attention, people are told not to jump to conclusions. That's sound advice, huh? But refusing to jump to conclusions does not require us to stop asking questions and stop thinking. The deaths of Nolan Wells and Tamla Horsford are different cases involving different people, different locations, different evidence. And they should be investigated on their own facts. Yet it's understandable why so many people see similarities that deserve scrutiny rather than dismissal. Because there's a pattern here. In both cases, a black person was with a predominantly white group just before their death. In both cases, family members and many members of the public question whether the initial explanations fully accounted for what happened. In both cases, Internet investigations began comparing timelines, witness statements, and available evidence while authorities continued their investigations that they were pushed into because it got so much attention from the public. Right? Trust is earned through transparency. When investigations appear incomplete, inconsistent, or leave significant questions unanswered, people naturally fill those gaps. That is not because conspiracy theories are inherently persuasive. It's because unanswered questions create a vacuum. The goal should never be convict people on social media. The goal should be demand investigations thorough enough that the public has confidence in the outcome, whatever that outcome may be. But the vacuum that's left open by law enforcement when there are patterns speaks volumes to how we as a people through our experience frame this situation. Because throughout American history, there have been cases involving black victims where families believe investigations ended too quickly or failed to fully address conflicting evidence. Those experiences shape how many communities respond. Whether every suspicion ultimately proves justified or not, that history influences public trust. That's why dismissing concerns with phrases like, there's no evidence of foul play. There's no evidence of foul play. When there's evidence of foul play, for instance, when Tamla Horsford, they said, oh, no evidence of foul play. She was smoking a cigarette and she fell off the balcony and that was it. But her body showed blunt force trauma. No evidence of foul play. There. No evidence of foul play. Suicide. How many do we have that were recently found hung? Okay, how many? Just in the past few months. In the past year. Since 2000. And let me tell you something, if you don't realize it as a black person, okay, white supremacy has ramped up the war that they have already had declared on black people. They ramped up the war. And these killings are happening more and more often. Police shootings. People being jumped. The firefighter came, rolled by, saw black people having a good time, went back home and got his rifle because they didn't respond to him calling them a bunch of N-words. They was like, pfft. You know, we're not concerned about his ignorance. Not expecting his fool to come back with a rifle. Just like I told you earlier. Black men hanging out in their own neighborhood, kids playing in the background. These white dudes show up and start popping. Understand that global white supremacy has a plan for you. Okay? They will exploit you. If they can't exploit you, they will enslave you. If they can't enslave you, they will kill you. Wake up. Because our response to war has been recently too weak. This is the Open Eye. WHGE 95.3 FM. This is Dope and I. All right. You know, the day Democrats walked away from FDR, the Democrats right now, some sorry ass people. Franklin Delano Roosevelt was the only president in American history that elected the 4 terms. Didn't finish the 4th term. 4 times the American people sent FDR back to the White House. Now, I think calling him probably the 20th century's greatest president, but I don't dismiss his racism and his talent to the Southern Democrats. But Roosevelt did more than win elections. He transformed the relationship between the American government and the American people. FDR led this country through the Great Depression and most of World War II. But perhaps his greatest political achievement was establishing a simple principle. The wealth and resources of a nation should benefit the people of that nation, not merely the people wealthy enough to own it. That was the heart of the New Deal. Roosevelt understood something today's Democratic Party seems afraid to even say. Capitalism is predatory when left unregulated. Capitalism naturally seeks cheap labor, higher profits, fewer regulations, lower taxes, and greater concentration of wealth. FDR understood that government had to stand between ordinary people and unchecked economic power. He wasn't trying to destroy capitalism. He was trying to prevent capitalism from destroying democracy. And that distinction is important. Because when FDR entered office, capitalism had already collapsed under the weight of speculation, greed, banking failures, and economic inequality. People were hungry. Banks were failing. Imagine going to the bank and they done locked the door and said, "We ain't got your money. We just ain't got it." And your families are losing their homes. Unemployment was devastating communities. Elderly Americans were living and dying in poverty. And Roosevelt didn't tell struggling Americans to be patient. He didn't tell them the stock market was doing well. He didn't tell them that helping ordinary people was too expensive. He put the federal government to work. Jobs, infrastructure, Social Security, labor protections, financial regulation, public investment. The Democratic Party became associated with the ideal that government had a responsibility to protect ordinary people. And that political philosophy helped Democrats dominate American politics for generations. That political inheritance continued through JFK and Lyndon Baines Johnson. And I will say this clearly. If it was not for the catastrophe of Vietnam, LBJ would be remembered as one of the greatest domestic presidents in American history. Look at the record. Medicare, Medicaid, the Civil Rights Act, the Voting Rights Act, federal investment in education, the war on poverty, food assistance, housing programs, consumer protection, public broadcasting. The Great Society was incomplete. It was imperfect. But at least it had ambition. At least Democrats once believed government could be used to fight poverty, to fight hunger, to fight discrimination, to expand opportunity, to improve the lives of ordinary people. And then came the conservative movement, the conservative counter-revolution. And then came Ronald Reagan. May he roast in hell and may the devil sodomize him with a pitchfork. But he did more than change tax policy, okay? He changed America's political language because suddenly government was the enemy. The poor were the problem. Welfare became a dirty word. Labor unions became the enemy. Regulation became oppression. Tax cuts for the wealthy became economic policy. And corporate greed became ambition. And black poverty was cynically weaponized to sell an economic agenda that ultimately transformed enormous power upward. But here's the tragedy. The Republicans moved right and the sorry-ass Democrats followed them. Democrats became afraid of being called liberal. They abandoned organized labor. They embraced Wall Street. They accepted deregulation. They supported trade policies that devastated working communities. See, Reagan, he rose to hell, made the devil sodomizing with a pitchfork. He dragged the country so far right that when Clinton came along, he seemed liberal. The Clinton was Republican light. And Barack Obama was just Clinton in blackface politically. See, they started measuring the health of America by the stock market instead of the kitchen table. And eventually too many so-called moderate Democrats became little more than Republican light. Republicans would rob you while insulting you. Democrats got around to, they would rob you while explaining how painful the decision was for them to rob you. And perhaps the greatest mistake the Democratic Party ever made was putting FDR's second Bill of Rights on the shelf and leaving it there. In 1944, Franklin Roosevelt said something extraordinary. He argued that political freedom was incomplete without economic security. Think about that. Freedom of speech is important. Voting rights are essential. Equality before the law is necessary. But how free are you when one medical emergency can bankrupt your family? How free are you when your landlord can raise the rent beyond your ability to pay? How free are you when you work 40 hours a week and still can't afford food, housing, transportation, and health care? How free are you when getting an education requires decades of debt? How free are you when corporations control your job, your housing, your health care, your information, and increasingly your government? See, FDR understood something America has forgotten. Economic security is part of freedom. He envisioned an America where people had the right to meaningful employment, a living income, decent housing, medical care, education, security in old age, protection against the economic disasters that ordinary people cannot survive alone. That was more than 80 years ago. And we are still arguing over whether Americans deserve health care. And what's at the root of that argument? Because white people don't want universal health care because black people will get it. That's not speculation. That's not some racist, reverse racism trope. That's documented history. From Teddy Roosevelt up through Obama. Got people running around talking about health care is a right. It is a privilege, not a right. Jeez Louise. Yeah. We're still arguing whether workers deserve a living wage. Still arguing whether elderly people should retire with dignity. God damn it, I'm old. Tired of working. Still arguing over whether corporations should be allowed to become more powerful than the government elected to regulate them. And understand this. Capitalism without democratic restraint does not produce freedom for everybody. It produces freedom for the people who own everything. Everybody else is free to work for them, free to rent from them, free to borrow from them, free to pay interest to them, and free to go into debt for education, which used to be free. Free to go bankrupt because they got sick, and free to work until they die. That's not freedom. That's economic dependency wrapped in a flag. FDR understood that capitalism requires guardrails, strong unions, progressive taxation, financial regulation, public investments, social security. A government powerful enough to protect ordinary people from institutions far more powerful than any individual citizen. And the Democratic Party walked away from too much of that inheritance. Then Democrats wonder why working people stop believing in them. Or stop believing them, period. You cannot abandon labor and continue calling yourself the party of working people. You can't take Wall Street money and pretend to fight concentrated wealth. You cannot defend a healthcare system that bankrupts families and then wonder why people are angry. You cannot tell young people that universal health care, affordable education, decent housing, and economic security are unrealistic. Why do you think Zoran Mandani is so popular? Because he said we can make this happen and then showed them. Then what were the rest of us doing? Watching unlimited money for war, corporate subsidies, and billionaires. The problem is not that Franklin Roosevelt's ideals are outdated. The problem is that his work was never finished. So to the Democratic Party, I say, take FDR's Second Bill of Rights off the damn shelf. Dust it off, read it, study it, and finish the work. America does not need another focus group. America does not need another consultant explaining why Democrats should move further to the right. You morons. America does not need Republican light. America needs a political movement willing to say without apology, the economy exists to serve human beings. Human beings do not exist to serve the economy. Roosevelt understood that. Johnson understood that. Kennedy understood that. The labor movement understood that. The civil rights movement understood that political freedom without economic power is unfinished freedom. The question is no longer whether Franklin Roosevelt was right. History already answered that. The real question is whether today's Democratic Party has the courage to reclaim the principles that once made it the party of working people, or whether it is content to remain a pale imitation of the very ideology FDR spent his presidency fighting. Because if Democrats refuse to fight for economic justice, someone else will claim the anger of working Americans. Nature hates a vacuum. Politics does too. Franklin Roosevelt didn't build the New Deal because it was politically safe. He built it because millions of Americans were suffering. And government either had to serve the people or surrender the country to concentrated wealth. That choice has not changed. And never has. Take that Second Bill of Rights off the shelf. A nation is not judged by how many billionaires it creates. A nation is judged by whether ordinary people can live with dignity, security, opportunity, and hope. The Democratic Party once understood that. America is still waiting for it to remember. I'm Patrice Gibbs. This is The Open Eye. WHGE 95.3 FM. Black people, do not travel alone. Tell someone you trust where you're going. Tell your loved ones that you are not suicidal. Write a note that you are not suicidal for additional evidence. And carry some form of protection. Stay vigilant and safe. If I die under suspicious circumstances, I did not take my own life. I do not consent to having my story dismissed, distorted, or forgotten. Demand every piece of evidence, demand transparency, demand independent investigations, demand accountability from every institution entrusted with the truth. Do not allow my name to become another unanswered question or another forgotten headline. Refuse to accept convenient narratives without scrutiny. Insist that justice be pursued completely, honestly, and without fear or favor. If my life meant anything, let it strengthen your commitment to protecting one another, documenting the truth, and refusing to be silent in the face of injustice. Let my name be a reason to organize, educate, bear witness, and ensure that no family is denied the truth. Beloved, understand me well. Should I die at the hands of some of these white supremacist race soldiers, rest assured I did not commit suicide. Nor did I commit any crime that warranted a death sentence imposed on the street. I do not want a hashtag, a meme. I do not want a memorial with candles and stuffed animals. I do not want t-shirts with my photo on them. I do not want tributes on Facebook or Instagram. I do not want a big funeral with my distraught loved ones weeping and moaning. I do not want you to march, protest, or pray. Beloved, understand me well. I want you to avenge me severely. I want you to tear shit up. I want you to burn shit down. I want the demise of more than several of those white supremacist race soldiers, not just in my hometown, but across the nation. Who the hell am I? I am one who refuses to die in vain. I want my demise to be the beginning of the end of our casualties in the genocidal race war on our people. I love it. As we close today's program, I want to leave you with one final thought. Never allow anyone to convince you that thinking is dangerous. The people who fear your questions are usually the people who benefit from your silence. Read more. Study harder. Verify everything. Challenge politicians. Challenge stories. Challenge me. And that's the reality. Well, as we come to a close, I hope you learned something today, because I learned something before I got here. And as we always tell you, destiny determines who enters your life, but you decide who stays. Therefore, value those who value you, and don't treat those as a priority who treat you as an option. I'm Patrice Gibbs. This is The Open Eye on WHGE 95.3 FM. Stop. Thanks for joining us. Peace. All right. I'm out of here, y'all. Oh, yeah. It's still right here. Global African supremacy. The world was a much better place when the black man ruled.